Hello everyone, it's History Behind the Warrior, and as always, welcome back to yet another video. Today with us yet again doing another installment in my Mortal Kombat Across the Multiverse series, where instead of tackling your beloved characters within that of the main canon, here we instead do a deep dive lore retrospective of them across the series in the expanded medium beyond it. From spin-off games to movies to even TV shows, giving you all an interesting perspective and look at the character as he's evolved and changed from medium to medium. So with that said today, since we've been tackling a lot of the secret and hidden characters within the MK mythos, it really did only feel right that we tackle the first ever secret character within the Mortal Kombat franchise, Reptile, aka Syzoth. Now Reptile is a beloved fan favorite, and throughout the franchise is arguably the character that evolved the most, or in some cases, de-evolved, as he started off as a humanoid reptile man, to full-blown scaly boy, to then a vessel for the Dragon King Onaga. Syzoth has really undergone a crazy path and journey throughout the series. So the real question right now is, how has this been reflected in the expanded canon? And what other versions and iterations of him exist from canon to canon? That is what we will of course be tackling today. But of course, quick disclaimer as always, just before we do get the video going, I first do strongly recommend checking out the History of Reptile episode, because it just allows you to get a better picture of what we'll be talking about here, and just an idea of what exactly is going on with Syzoth, allowing us to paint more of a clear contrast between the canon and non-canon versions of this character. And two, of course, just before we do start, as always, if you like what we do here and wish to see more, please don't forget to subscribe as well as give this video a thumbs up. It's a small thing, but trust me when I say it really does help out the channel in the long run. So anyway, let's delve right into things, starting off at the very top with spin-off games. More specifically, Mortal Kombat Shaolin Monks. Now Shaolin Monks is an extremely soft retelling of Mortal Kombat 2, as events unfold in a very different manner, but do take place at the tail end of the first tournament, smoothly transitioning into the events of the second one. Even so, Reptile would be one of the many combatants on Outworld side that can be seen in the climax of the first tournament, battling against the actor Johnny Cage, and taking a pretty hefty chunk out of his head until he's kicked off by Liu Kang. Yet even swept aside, he would continue to battle the actor until Goro arrived, where Johnny would then attempt to take the Shogun down, only to be pummeled and then tossed away. With the defeat of Shang Tsung to the hands of Liu Kang, the island would begin to crumble, and forced to escape, the sorcerer can be seen casting a portal, of which the Zarteran would step through, safely getting away. But despite his disappearance, Reptile would ever so briefly appear at the top of the pit stage, snarling at the player, before then suddenly disappearing. Now for those unaware, this is more than likely an Easter egg to the fact that this was how he first appeared in the series, where to unlock the secret MK1 Reptile fight, you needed to be on the pit stage and see a shadowy figure. Now, in terms of origins of this particular Reptile, very little was known or explored with him here. Of course, from a surface level look, we have your more bog standard Reptile design, but if we are to draw comparisons to his more mainline timeline counterpart, then we see that Syzoth has physically regressed greatly here, appearing more reptilian in design than human. In fact, it's so much so that his distinct features do peer and press through his costume and design. Thus, this iteration of the character may have been severed from the matriarch for a greater amount of time. From this point onwards, Reptile would play a very minor role in the game, found within the Living Forest. Once confronted by the Shaolin brothers, Syzoth here would unleash a ginormous serpent to consume them, even trying to crush them within the confines of a small temple. And whilst both he and the serpent do have the element of surprise, Reptile was simply unable to defeat the duo, as his jaw is snapped open and he's drowned within the arena, marking a pretty grisly end for him, all things considered. So Reptile does play a super minor role during the events of Shaolin Monks, but he is at the very least a playable character, as you're able to unlock him by completing a puzzle within the Living Forest. And as spin-offs do go, this does mark Reptile's one and only time he does appear in a non-canon game. Which now finally takes us onto the movie side of things here, starting with the fan-beloved 1995 installment Now, kinda similar to that of his game role, Reptile would play an extremely small minor role in the film, lightly sprinkled throughout and acting as a servant of Shang Tsung and the Emperor. Whilst he's not super prevalent throughout the film, he does effectively act as the eyes and ears to his superiors, spying on the Earthrealm fighters as well as their whereabouts, utilizing his invisible abilities to hide in plain sight, becoming completely invisible to the naked eye. So during the early stages of the film here, Syzoth would make his first appearance as the Earthrealm combatants arrive at Shang Tsung's island, disguising himself as a statue and bearing witness to a very awkward prolonged stare between Kitana and Liu Kang. Although this could be seen as nothing, at this point in time, this is very important information for Shang Tsung, having suspicions of the princess's betrayal of the Emperor. Thus, turmoil is instantly sown between the two before the tournament even starts. And as the tournament proceeds, Reptile can be seen once again, where he's of course shadowing the Earthrealm defenders, with them seeking out the princess and hunting down Shang Tsung. But even with his invisibility, Reptile would be sensed by Liu Kang in the catacombs of the temple, forced to actually blind the Shaolin and then retreat, revealing his identity to the group. Because of this, the next time the two would cross paths, he would not have the upper hand. Now from this point onwards, Reptile would be completely absent during the fights in the tournament, choosing to observe and wait. It's only until Goro's death and defeat by Johnny Cage, to which he'd finally appear once more. With Sonya kidnapped and dragged into Outworld by Shang Tsung, Johnny and Liu are forced to travel to their domain, with Liu Kang almost instantly being able to recognize the presence of the Saurian, finding his body and tossing it into a rotting corpse. But little did we know that this was no ordinary body. This corpse of unknown origin would ensnare the raptor, granting it a second chance at life by imprinting both its and its own DNA together, creating this very peculiar and strange ninja hybrid of sorts. But it is most certainly one we're familiar with. We simply just don't know who's in control of the body here. Either way, this spliced reptile unleashes a formidable assault against the Shaolin, drop-kicking him through a wall and pushing him to his absolute limits, proving to be one of Liu's most fearsome adversaries in this tournament. But despite the hybridization, the monk would persist, weakening the Saurian before finally finishing him off with his iconic bicycle kicks, severing the link that Reptile had with the rotting corpse and crushing him beneath his heel, seemingly marking an end to Reptile. However, with that in mind, it would be criminal of me to not at the very least mention that we do see some more Saurians in the film's sequel, Mortal Kombat Annihilation. But what we do have here isn't necessarily Reptile, but what is believed to be his fellow raptors. Sadly, due to the nature of this film and how incredibly brief their time on screen is, it's simply impossible to know who these trio are. And whilst we see two of them fight Raiden, we don't actually know what happens to the third one. He just fades and disappears. So the fate of what becomes of the Raptors here are completely unknown, and the movies don't do a great job of letting us know what happened to that of Zarterra. However, it would be the canonical prequel TV show to the movie, Mortal Kombat Conquest, that would serve as a storytelling piece for what became of this universe's approach of the Zarterrans. How did they fall to Shao Kahn? And what was their relationship leading up into this film? I will touch on that when we get to the TV section, so bear with me. Now with that said, this does take us onto the 2021 reboot, Mortal Kombat. Now with the events of this movie taking place prior to the tournament itself, Outworld here has begun to lead a very vicious assault against Earthrealm, looking to kill their champions before the tournament could even begin, therefore making them the de facto winners. And here, Syzoth would be appointed the mission of tracking down and killing Kano. But what he had not quite anticipated is that he had already been found and captured by the likes of Sonya Blade and Cole Young, seeking to also gain information from him here. Thus, by sneaking into their facility, he would be attacked by the duo, maiming Kano but most certainly leaving him alive. By utilizing his invisibility, Syzoth at the very least would gain advantage against the two, until a flare is tagged to his body, revealing his true form. With the odds against him, Syzoth would simply be overwhelmed with his heart being plucked from his chest by Kano, marking an end to this Reptile's very brief time and appearance in the series. And tragically, beyond everything I've talked about or mentioned here, we sadly don't know much about this iteration of the character, nor his background or the fate of his people here. So now let's roll things back all the way to the 90s, and more specifically, Mortal Kombat Conquest. Set during the age of the Great Kung Lao, the Conquest series was designed to serve as a period piece to this canon, a show that would expand on the concepts, ideas, and characters that the movies didn't quite have the time to develop. And we learn a considerable amount about Reptile, as well as the Saurian race. Now starting off here with the big fact that the Reptile we do have here is in fact not the same Reptile we do have in the 95 movie. They are in fact two different separate characters, with neither of the two being referred to as Syzoth. But keep in mind that the name Syzoth itself wasn't actually something introduced until 2015 with the release of Mortal Kombat X. So things were very different at this point of release, and we can probably assume that the name Reptile could simply just be a title or mantle of sorts. It will make more sense by the end of this segment. But arguably the most strange and jarring alteration here is the fact that for a majority of the show, it's implied that a form of black magic would be utilized for them to have more of a humanoid form, because other Saurians in the show like Siri and Anka would use such magics in order to retain a humanoid appearance, allowing them to switch in and out of their reptilian selves. Now in this timeline, it is revealed here that Reptile was the leader of his people, being their ambassador and representative amongst Shao's generals, as the Conqueror was once again indeed successful in merging their worlds together. Being a general amongst his high table, he would prove himself to be extremely loyal to him, carrying out assassinations and doing whatever he wished. But in his heart of hearts, Reptile maintained this facade out of the interest and preservation of his people, wishing to restore Zaterra at any point in time, and this would all lead into the events of the show itself, where he would kill Taja's lover Tomas, one of Conquest's original characters and protagonists, putting him in direct conflict against the Great Kung Lao. But such loyalty though would not go unrewarded, at least not to Shao Kahn. Knowing of Zaterra's fate, Reptile would be reached out to by Queen Kriya, a queen of the Amazon race who was in direct conflict with Shao Kahn. Now knowing of what Shao had done to Reptile's people, she would have him be recruited into her ranks, alongside the rest of his people, in the hopes that their combined efforts could overthrow the Emperor and give Zaterra a second chance at life. Understandably, with no better choices on the table, Reptile would take it, and retain a very brief romantic interest with the Queen, as they sought to mate and create the ultimate hybrid amongst their races. So with the realms united as one, they would lead a formidable assault against the Emperor. This war would only begin to simmer down once Kriya fell to the hands of her daughter, leading to the alliance very quickly crumbling, with Reptile and his people effectively branded as traitors. Shao would lead a very aggressive hunt against them, with Reptile himself actually dying during the finale of Conquest. Hence why I do say that the Reptile we do see here has to be very different from the 95 version. Now shuffling along, we do have Mortal Kombat Rebirth, and this is easily by far the most different version of the character, set in a more realistic real-world setting. This depiction of Syzoth is entirely stripped of any magical capabilities. Born with a rare skin disease known as Harlequin ichneosis, who was expected to only survive for 2 weeks, but that was decades ago, and since then, he would go on to become a serial killer with a taste for human flesh, later being invited to a tournament of sorts for very mysterious reasons. Now due to the vague nature of this all, we don't know very much about this Reptile. Hell, it's not even really Reptile, as that is simply the codename given to him by Jax. All in all, this is a very different take on the character, but only real resemblance is the name given to them. Outside of that, they are very different individuals. sequels. Now coming into the more animated side of things, we do now have Mortal Kombat Defenders of the Realm, a separate continuity that was designed to appeal to children by blending elements of both MK3 as well as a lot of elements from the '95 movie. So that does mean that yes, Reptile did most certainly die already in this timeline. So the events of Defenders of the Realm kind of deals with the aftermath of what occurred here, with the Zarterans invading Earthrealm and thriving under their new leader, Kombat. It's never quite truly elaborated on if they were looking to hunt down the Earthrealm defenders and Liu Kang for killing Syzoth, or if they simply wanted to take the realm itself. But either way, they do wind up being unsuccessful in this attack, with Kombat defeated and the Saurians retreating to Outworld. So this now finally brings us to Reptile's last, final non-canon appearance here, Mortal Kombat Scorpion's Revenge. And the events of this particular spin-off is an incredibly loose retelling of the '95 movie, and certain bits and pieces of the first tournament of the first game. Due to the heavy focus of the tournament aspect of this film, Reptile would be one of the many representatives on Outworld's side, looking to kill and conquer Earthrealm's champions. So he's seen very early on, pitted against the likes of Sonya Blade. And at first, Syzoth is at the advantage here, completely taking her by surprise. It's only until she uses the terrain and smears him in mud, to which then he's forced to decloak and go up against her in a more one-on-one fight. However, he severely underestimates the skill of Sonya Blade, as she completely overwhelms him, evading his acid and completely crushing his spine, for then finally decapitating him, marking a very brief and brutal end to the Saurian. And like that, everyone, that has been it for the history of Reptile throughout the ages. And I gotta say, this has been a really fun one for me to cover. Not just to see how wild and different each and every version of him is, because whilst he's always been dubbed as the Green Ninja of the series, honestly, out of all of them here, Reptile has really changed the most. So it's always been interesting to see how the expanded media tries to reflect that, and in what ways do they homage or expand on the ideas set before them. Because honestly, he's just a character with such a wide and broad canvas, but it allows for a lot of freedom with how he's tackled. So with that said and everything covered here, I now relay the question to all of you, which version of Reptile was your favourite? For me, it's always gonna have to be that 1995 version. I'm such a massive fan of not just that fight, but that spectacular soundtrack that plays alongside him. It's so goddamn good, it's perfection. But for now everyone, that has been it for me. So if you have any suggestions for the next episode, please put it down below, as it's the best way of letting me know what you guys like to see. But until then everyone, as always, stay strong, stay well, and I'll catch you in the next one.